Hello everyone, my name is Madison Arthur, a local real estate broker here in Seattle, Washington, helping buyers and sellers across the region. So today we're going to be talking about the new Washington state laws regarding buyer broker compensation and the new buyer broker services agreement. So this is obviously something that's been going on for around a year. The laws have kind of changed throughout 2024, and now I feel as if they're in a place where it's going to be pretty consistent for the following years. So I thought I would jump on and talk a little bit about what's changed, what I've been seeing, and how this impacts you as a buyer or seller. So let's jump right into the video. Okay, so we're going to first talk about how things have been historically managed. So starting with the listing side, your listing broker and seller would agree upon a percentage to provide to the buyer side as well as the listing side. So this is a fee roughly between 5 and 6% is what we've typically seen. And then they would advertise this fee onto the Northwest MLS for buyer brokers and buyers to see. Now, upon writing an offer on a home, this set fee would be given to the buyer, and that was kind of as simple as it would be. You could certainly negotiate for a higher fee if you felt that it was low, if you were a buyer broker, but it was all advertised on the MLS, and essentially the way that it would work is that the listing side would choose the fee for the buyer broker. So the issue here is that it is against antitrust laws, and the idea is that this method prohibits there to be competition in the marketplace amongst buyer brokers, and so that's why this practice is no longer allowed. But looking at the flip side, the reason why this has been the practice for so long is because buyers need to have that compensation fee wrapped into their mortgage in order to pay it. It would be a really large sum to pay out of pocket. So now we're going to jump into the solution and the way that things are currently operating in the Northwest MLS. Keep in mind, this is Washington state specific. I think other states do it a little bit differently, but this is just what we see in our MLS and in our market. The listing side and the seller independently choose what the fee is that they're going to offer to the buyer broker. It could be anything from 0 to, typically 3%, 2.5%, 2%. And they have the full right to choose whether they're going to offer something or not. And then independently, the buyer broker and their corresponding buyer will then select a fee that they agree upon. And so the idea is that the listing side, they don't have to offer anything. But they can still offer it, and it can still be seen in the Northwest MLS, as you can see right here. A lot of listings tend to run between 3 to 2.5%. So while it is still advertised in the MLS, what's really changed is how buyers and their buyer brokers agree upon this fee. So the idea is that the buyer broker comes to their client with a set fee that they typically have. So, we see, again, typically 2 to 3%. But again, you ultimately can choose this number as a buyer broker. And then you sign what is called a buyer broker services agreement, which I will discuss here in a few minutes. And that dictates an agreement between the buyer and the buyer broker about how much that broker is going to be paid out of the transaction, as well as a lot of other terms that are important for just setting a client up for success. So ultimately, it's a form to confirm payment for the buyer broker and also confirm that you are hiring them as a buyer as your broker. So now during the negotiation period, the buyer broker can accept whatever fee the seller is offering. Typically, that can be in full or partially. And then if there is by chance a remaining difference, such as a buyer broker agreement paying 3% but seller offering 2.5%, the buyer and the buyer broker can choose from a variety of ways how they want to solve the situation. And here are just a couple of common ones that I've seen. So the first is the buyer broker can negotiate for their fee depending on how competitive the situation is. The other is that they can increase the purchase price of the home to correlate with how much that buyer broker fee is and then take it out in seller credits. Clients also have the option to just directly pay their broker that remaining difference, or buyer broker will just accept that 2.5% compensation and agree with their client that they don't need to be paid the additional 0.5%. And ultimately, the advice that I have for you is, if you're a buyer, just make sure that you have this conversation with your real estate broker ahead of time so you know exactly what to expect in that negotiation period. Okay, so as mentioned, the buyer-broker services agreement is a form by which the buyer and the buyer-broker agree to work together. So it's essentially a hiring form, and also they agree on the terms of compensation for the buyer-broker, aka how they will be paid. And the way that this contract works is in Washington State, the rule is it must be signed as soon as reasonably practical. So what does that mean for you? Well, what I think is that it's ultimately up to the buyer-broker's process, and it can be a little bit different per person. So, for example, sometimes buyer-brokers will have an initial consultation where they, pitch their services, ask you lots of questions, learn about your wants and needs, and at the end of that, they may ask that you sign this contract before continuing on in the process. I think that's pretty common. Another that I've seen is, if you're meeting a buyer in a situation where you're meeting them at a home tour, then you may ask that they sign the buyer-broker services agreement for a short period of time, such as 10 days, and say that they can, extend the agreement if they feel that both parties want to continue forward. I've seen this. I've also seen doing that initial tour day without any buyer-broker agreement in place, but mentioning it and having clients sign that once trust has been built and they feel as if they're ready to officially hire the broker. So those are just a few situations that I've seen, but I do think ultimately the idea is that before you truly conduct real estate brokerage services, where you're acting as a fiduciary for your client, such as writing offers, touring homes, and asking lots of questions to the listing broker, creating a search in the MLS, that kind of stuff, I think that by then you should have a buyer-broker agreement signed. So that's kind of where we're at with the real estate world right now, and I just wanted to pop on and make a quick video clarifying these changes and what they mean for you. If you have any other questions about the new laws or just real estate in general, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and I wish you a great rest of your day. Bye.